My name is Evelyn Tucker, and I'm 32 years old. For most of my life, I believed that love was built on patience, loyalty, and quiet understanding. But now looking back, I realize that sometimes love can blind you so completely that you don't notice when it turns into humiliation until it's too late. Ethan and I met in college. He was the kind of man who could charm an entire room without even trying. Ambitious, magnetic, always surrounded by people. I was the quiet one, usually tucked away in the back corner of the lab working on code with my headphones in. Somehow he noticed me. Maybe it was because I wasn't impressed by his charm like everyone else. He said I made him feel grounded. I liked that. We were together for 5 years, engaged for 1. Through all those years, I thought we were a team. When he lost his first job after graduation, I paid the rent for months. I picked up freelance work just to keep us steady. When his father got sick, I was the one who drove him to the hospital every weekend, sat through the long nights, even helped his family when the bills piled up. His mom once called me the glue that kept him together. Back then, I believed in us completely. But love changes quietly like rot under paint. After Ethan got hired at a fast-growing marketing firm, things began to shift. He started surrounding himself with people who lived for attention. Networking events, expensive dinners, endless hustle talk. He began comparing everything: our clothes, our home, even how I spoke in public. "You should dress up more," he'd say. "You need to look like you belong." I'd laugh it off, pretending it didn't sting. Then came that night, the dinner that broke everything. It was one of those elegant, intimidating events his company threw for clients. Ethan told me I had to come because it'll look good for my image. I wasn't thrilled. Corporate small talk wasn't my thing, but I went. I wanted to support him. I even bought a new dress, simple but elegant. When we arrived, he was radiant, laughing, introducing people, slipping easily into the rhythm of the room. I tried to follow his lead, offering polite smiles and handshakes. For a while it went fine. Then I noticed her, Clara. Tall, confident, the kind of woman who doesn't just enter a room, she takes command of it. I'd heard her name before. She'd just gotten promoted. Ethan talked about her constantly. Clara landed another client today. Clara's presentation was flawless. His tone had always been admiring, but that night, admiration turned into something else. He gravitated toward her like a magnet. Their laughter carried across the room. When I tried to join the conversation, the air shifted like I was interrupting a private joke. Clara looked me up and down, smiled politely, then turned back to Ethan. I told myself I was imagining it, that it was just work talk, that I shouldn't make a scene. But a few minutes later, when I approached their table with 2 glasses of champagne, Ethan leaned close to me, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "You're embarrassing me," he whispered sharply. "Just pretend we're not together tonight." My hand froze around the glass. At first I thought I misheard, but then he looked at me cold, dismissive, the way you'd look at someone who just doesn't belong. My stomach turned, the room blurred, I could hear my own heartbeat louder than the music. "Pretend we're not together." The words sliced through me like a clean-cut, small but deep enough to bleed for years. I didn't argue, I didn't cry. I simply nodded once, turned around, and walked away. For the rest of the night, I sat alone at the bar, watching him from across the room, watching the man I loved flirt openly with another woman while pretending I was invisible. The bartender asked if I wanted another drink. I declined. I needed my mind clear, not blurry. He didn't come over once. When the night ended, he found me by the exit, acting as if nothing had happened. "You ready to go?" he asked, like we were still fine. I followed him silently to the car. The drive home was wordless, heavy, with everything unsaid. That whisper, those 4 words, played in my head over and over like a broken record. "You're embarrassing me." I couldn't stop replaying the years behind us. The late nights helping him prepare for interviews. The weekends spent supporting his family. The sacrifices I made so he could chase his dreams. All of it felt erased in one cruel whisper. When we got home, he didn't apologize. He didn't explain. He just went to bed. I sat in the living room, staring at the wall, wondering when exactly love had turned into shame. I wish I could say I confronted him right then, that I demanded an answer. But the truth is, I didn't. I was too stunned, too hollow. I told myself maybe it was stress, maybe I'd misunderstood. But deep down I knew. Something had shifted permanently. That night, as I lay awake beside him staring at the ceiling, I realized something terrifying. He hadn't just embarrassed me, he'd erased me. And for the first time in 5 years, I started to wonder who I really was without him. The days after that dinner felt like walking through fog. Everything was muted, muffled, unreal. Ethan acted as if nothing had happened. He'd hum in the kitchen, scroll his phone during breakfast, tell me about some client or project like we hadn't crossed a line that night. I watched him closely, waiting for an apology, for any flicker of regret, but none came. I tried to bring it up once, gently. "Ethan," I said, keeping my voice steady. "What you said that night at the dinner. Why did you say that?" He didn't look up from his laptop. "Oh, come on, Evelyn. Don't start," he sighed. "You know how these events are. I just needed to keep things professional. You're overthinking it." Professional. That word hung in the air, stinging more than the whisper itself. I wanted to ask professional with whom, Clara. But I swallowed the question. I didn't want to sound jealous. Still, something inside me began to ache in a place words couldn't reach. His phone was glued to his hand, his smile too quick to fade when I entered the room. He started working late client dinners that always ended near midnight. When I asked if I could join one sometime, he chuckled softly. "You wouldn't enjoy it. It's not your scene." Not my scene. I remembered when we used to be each other's scene movie nights on the couch, cheap takeout, laughing until midnight over nothing. Now it was like living with a stranger who was pretending to remember who I was. A few weeks later, it finally happened. We were home on a Sunday night. I was cooking dinner the way I always did. The scent of garlic filled the kitchen, warm and safe. Ethan sat at the counter, scrolling his phone, tapping his fingers. His silence had weight to it, deliberate, heavy. "Ethan," I said quietly, "can we talk?" He looked up, bored. "About what?" "That dinner, the distance between us. You've been different." He leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, and smiled a smile that wasn't kind. "Different, Evelyn, I've just grown. You're comfortable, and that's fine, but some of us want more than comfort. Clara understands that." It took a second for my brain to catch up. "What about Clara?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He shrugged, like we were discussing weather. "We've been talking for a while. She's ambitious-driven. She challenges me. You used to be that way, remember? But lately you just exist." I froze. "Are you saying you're seeing her?" His tone was calm, almost clinical. "Emotionally, yes. Physically, recently. It just happened." He said it like a confession to a therapist, detached and self-justified. I stared at him, a fork still in my hand. "Why tell me now?" "Because I owe you honesty," he said. "Clara pushes me to be better. You're holding me back with your predictability. I need someone who matches my energy, not someone who plays it safe." Predictable, holding him back. The words fell on me like cold rain. I thought of every night I'd stayed awake helping him rehearse presentations, the weekends I'd skipped outings so I could drive him to his dad's treatments, the career opportunities I'd turned down so we could stay near his family. I'd built a life around his comfort, and he was calling me the cage. I placed the fork down gently. "So what happens now?" He didn't hesitate. "I'm moving out. Clara and I found a place downtown. You'll be fine, Evelyn. You always are." That line, "you'll be fine," burned worse than betrayal. He was already packing himself out of my life, and he had the nerve to say it like I was some project that would run on autopilot after he left. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Something deeper than anger took over, something still and quiet. "All right," I said. My voice low but even. "If that's what you want, I'll help you pack." For the first time, his composure cracked. "You're not going to beg me to stay." I looked at him, the man I'd loved for 5 years, the man I'd believed in, now looking at me like a ghost he'd already buried. "No," I said. "You've made your choice. I won't fight for someone who doesn't want to be here." The silence that followed was suffocating. He blinked, maybe expecting tears, but none came. I turned away before he could see the way my jaw trembled. That night I packed his clothes, neatly folded his shirts, and set his belongings by the door. He left the next morning without saying goodbye. The sound of the front door closing echoed through the apartment, hollow and final. When I walked back into the bedroom, the empty side of the bed stared at me like a wound. All I could think about was that whisper, "Pretend we're not together tonight." Now I finally understood what it meant. He'd already been pretending long before he said it. But if he wanted me to disappear, I would. Just not in the way he expected. I didn't know it then, but that quiet nod I gave him, that refusal to beg, would be the beginning of his unraveling. Because sometimes silence isn't surrender. Sometimes it's the first sound of someone reclaiming their power. The first week after Ethan left, the silence was unbearable. Not the peaceful kind that wraps around you like a blanket. This was the sharp kind, the kind that echoes. Every corner of the apartment still smelled like him. His cologne lingered on the pillows, his coffee mug sat untouched by the sink. I didn't touch anything at first. I walked through those rooms like a stranger visiting a crime scene, trying to understand what went wrong. The bed felt too big. Meals felt pointless. Even music, something I used to love, became unbearable. Every song seemed to know his name. But the strangest thing was how the world kept moving. His friends stopped calling. Mutual acquaintances pretended not to know what happened. And on social media, the truth played out like a movie I wasn't cast in. There he was, smiling, arm around Clara, champagne in hand. The captions were nauseating new beginnings. Found my match. Finally free. Free. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt. It was how effortlessly he replaced me, how he turned our history into a stepping stone for his next performance. For a while, I didn't eat properly. Work became my anchor. I'd code for hours, eyes fixed to the screen, anything to drown out the images of him and her. My coworkers noticed the change, the silence, the forced smiles, but I brushed it off. Just tired, I'd say. Deadlines. Nights were the hardest. Sometimes I'd wake up reaching for a body that wasn't there. Sometimes I'd dream he came back, that I'd hear the key turn in the lock and he'd say I made a mistake. But morning always came, and reality stayed cruelly consistent. One afternoon, I found myself standing in front of the mirror. I looked exhausted. Hollow eyes, unwashed hair, a ghost of someone who used to be steady. That image jolted something awake inside me. I whispered out loud, "No more pretending." It was strange, the same words he once used to erase me now felt like a challenge. I wasn't going to pretend I was fine. I wasn't going to pretend I didn't matter. If he could rebuild his life, so could I, only this time for me. So I started small. I cleaned the apartment top to bottom, erasing his presence inch by inch. I boxed up his forgotten things, a jacket, a book, an old toothbrush, and dropped them at his office front desk without a note. Then I changed the locks. The next morning, I deleted my social media. Not to hide, but to reclaim peace. No more doom scrolling through the highlight reel of someone who had discarded me. No more looking for closure in captions. Instead, I went outside. At first, it felt strange walking through the park alone, noticing sunlight, listening to the sound of leaves crunch underfoot. I realized I'd forgotten what quiet joy felt like. That week, I signed up for a hiking group. I told myself I'd cancel later, but I didn't. On that first hike, my lungs burned, my legs ached, and for the first time in months, I felt alive. Surrounded by strangers, I wasn't Ethan's girlfriend or the woman who got left for Clara. I was just Evelyn. It became a ritual. Every weekend, I hiked a little farther, climbed a little higher. Somewhere along the trail between exhaustion and peace, I began to remember who I was before love became sacrifice. I started cooking again, not the kind of meals that catered to his tastes, but things I actually enjoyed. I bought flowers for myself, painted the walls a lighter shade, rearranged the furniture. Each small change felt like taking back one more piece of myself. At work, I began thriving again. My focus sharpened, my projects stood out. A senior developer noticed my consistency and offered me a promotion, the same one I'd turned down a year ago because Ethan didn't want me to travel. This time I said yes. Meanwhile, whispers about Ethan began to surface. A coworker who was still connected to that world mentioned it casually during lunch. "You heard about Ethan and Clara, total chaos." I didn't ask, but they continued anyway. Apparently, Clara had been making scenes at work, accusing Ethan of taking credit for her ideas. Management was involved. Rumors of tension, shouting matches, and missed deadlines. Ethan's perfect life wasn't so perfect anymore. That night, I sat by the window sipping tea. I didn't smile, but I didn't feel sad either. I just felt done. I realized something profound. I didn't need to wish him pain or karma. The universe didn't need my help. He was already living inside the consequences of his choices. And me, I was finally living outside the shadow of his validation. Months passed. My world became full again. New projects, new hobbies, new peace. I wasn't healed completely, but I was healing, and that mattered more. Sometimes I'd pass by places we used to go, the cafe where we'd sit for hours, the bookstore where he first kissed me, and I'd feel a brief ache like pressing on an old bruise. But then I'd breathe, remind myself, "You're not her anymore. You survived." Ethan wanted me to pretend I wasn't with him that night. So I did. And I've kept pretending ever since, pretending he no longer exists. And the best part, the longer I pretend, the more it feels real. Because in every way that matters, he's gone. By the time 6 months had passed, Ethan had become little more than a faded photograph in my memory. Edges, curling colors, washed out. I no longer checked his social media or asked mutual friends how he was doing. But life has a way of sending echoes even when you've stopped listening. One evening, after a long day at work, I got a message from an old coworker of his, someone who had once been friendly to both of us. "You probably don't care, but Ethan's in trouble. Clara's been tearing him apart at work." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I put the phone down, poured a glass of water, and went about my evening. I didn't reply. Still, that text stayed in my mind like a distant thundercloud, not close enough to fear, but loud enough to notice. Over the next few weeks, the whispers grew louder. Even people I barely spoke to mentioned his name. Apparently, the golden couple had tarnished fast. Clara's ambition, the very thing Ethan admired, had turned into manipulation. She'd been jealous of his clients' possessive during meetings, accusing him of flirting when he wasn't. Their fights became public, their coworkers uncomfortable. Then came the breaking point. Ethan was passed over for a promotion, one he'd bragged about months earlier. Clara got it instead. The irony was perfect. He had left me because I was too comfortable, too predictable. Now he was the one being replaced by someone who played the game better. A week later, he texted me. "Ethan. Hey, stranger. Been a while. Hope you're doing okay." I stared at the screen, feeling absolutely nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just a blank calm. Then I deleted the message without replying. A few days later, another one came. "Ethan. I know I messed up. Clara's not who I thought she was. Can we talk? Maybe grab coffee?" I almost laughed. The man who once told me to pretend we weren't together was now pretending we still had something left to discuss. I didn't respond. But the texts didn't stop. They multiplied small, desperate bursts over weeks. Some were apologetic. "I miss our talks." Some were defensive. "You're really going to ignore me after everything." Some turned bitter. "You think you're better than me now." It was fascinating watching his words collapse from arrogance to pleading to resentment. I didn't block him at first, not out of hope, but curiosity. I wanted to see just how far he'd fall. Then his family joined in. His brother called one evening, his tone cautious. "Evelyn, he's not doing well." Clara left him. He lost his job. "Maybe you could talk to him." I bit back a sigh. Talk to him about what? How to rebuild a life he destroyed himself. "Please," his brother said softly. "He really regrets what he did." I paused. The truth was, I didn't believe in revenge. I didn't need to see him suffer. But hearing that he was finally facing consequences, it didn't hurt. "Tell him I wish him peace," I said, "but I'm not his solution anymore." That night, I lay in bed thinking about all the ways he used to look down on me, my quietness, my lack of flash, my preference for simple things. He thought he was ascending when he left me. But sometimes the climb you're proudest of turns out to be the one that leads straight off a cliff. I didn't hear from him for a while after that. Life went on. I focused on my projects, my hikes, my small circle of friends. Then out of nowhere, another text. "Ethan, I saw your name in an article. Congrats on the app launch. You've done amazing. I'm really proud of you." Pride. From the same man who once called me embarrassing. I smiled to myself, not out of joy, but quiet recognition that I had finally stepped beyond his reach. I blocked his number that night. But when you finally close one door, life sometimes sends you through another. At work, during a tech conference in Seattle, I met Daniel, a data engineer, with an easy laugh and the kind of calm confidence that doesn't demand attention. He was kind without trying to prove it. We spent hours talking about everything from coding to hiking trails. When I mentioned I liked being out in nature alone, he smiled. "You sound like someone who's learned to enjoy her own company." I remember thinking yes, and it took losing everything to get here. Daniel didn't rush things. He didn't demand explanations about my past or make me feel like I had to earn affection through performance. Our connection grew quietly, a gentle rhythm instead of a race. For the first time in years, I felt safe. Then came another test. Ethan showed up again, not in person, but through a friend request. New account, new profile. His display picture was an old one, him smiling like he still had control over his narrative. I ignored it, but the request stayed there for days, a digital ghost hovering at the edge of my peace. One night, Daniel and I were cooking dinner when my phone buzzed again, another number I didn't recognize. Unknown. "You think you've won, don't you? You think ignoring me makes you better." I froze. Daniel noticed immediately. "Everything okay?" I forced a smile and deleted the message. "It's nothing." But deep down, I knew exactly who it was. Ethan was unraveling, and this time he wanted me to watch. I turned off my phone, exhaled slowly, and looked at Daniel. He grinned as he plated the food, humming under his breath, utterly unaware of the storm outside my past. And for the first time, I realized how powerful peace really is. Not the kind that comes from revenge, but the kind that grows when you finally stop caring who's watching. Ethan's world was cracking, mine was blooming, and all I had to do was nothing at all. 9 months after Ethan walked out of my life, I received an invitation that would bring everything full circle: Alex's wedding, one of our old mutual friends. At first, I almost didn't go. I knew Ethan might be there. The thought of seeing him again made something inside me tense, not out of fear, but the unease of revisiting a ghost you've finally learned to live without. But Alex was persistent. "Evelyn, you should come. You've grown so much. You deserve to celebrate with us. And don't worry," he added quietly, "you'll handle it better than he will." He was right. I had no reason to hide anymore. So I went wearing a soft emerald dress that fit like quiet confidence, my hair pinned back, my heart steady. Daniel came with me, his hand finding mine as naturally as breathing. He was my calm in every storm, but tonight, I didn't even need that calm. I had built my own. The wedding was held in a beautiful outdoor garden, sunlight spilling through the trees like gold. Laughter floated in the air, music weaving between tables, the scent of flowers, thick with life. It was the kind of evening that reminded you endings can make room for beginnings. I was talking with some old friends when I saw him. Ethan. He stood near the bar, thinner, older eyes heavy. His confidence, that polished, effortless glow he used to wear, was gone. Even from across the garden, I could see the exhaustion in his shoulders. His suit didn't fit right. His smile was forced. He noticed me almost instantly. His gaze lingered longer than I expected, searching maybe for guilt, maybe for permission to approach. I gave him neither. Daniel noticed the shift in my expression and leaned close. "That's him, isn't it?" I nodded once. "That's him. You okay?" "I've never been better," I said, and I meant it. An hour passed before Ethan finally approached. I was standing near the dessert table talking with Alex's wife when he appeared beside me, hesitant hands in his pockets. "Evelyn," he said softly, "hey." I turned slowly, offering a polite smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Ethan." He looked at me for a long moment, his voice faltering. "You look great, really great." "Thank you," I replied simply. His eyes flicked toward Daniel, who stood a few steps away chatting with another guest. "So you're with someone?" "Yes," I said. "Daniel." "Right," he muttered. "I've heard about him. Seems nice." There was an awkward pause, the kind heavy enough to make air feel thick. Finally he sighed. "Can we talk?" "Just privately." "It won't take long." Every instinct told me to refuse, but something in me wanted closure, not for him, for myself. So I nodded once and followed him a few steps away toward a quieter corner by the garden lights. He looked nervous. His voice shook. "I know I have no right to ask you for anything, but I need to say this. I lost everything, Evelyn. My job, my apartment, Clara." I cut him off gently. "Clara left." He nodded, shame flickering in his eyes. "Yeah, she cheated on me. With someone from work. Turns out she's not who I thought she was. Guess I got what I deserved." He tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. When things fell apart, I kept thinking about you, about how good you were to me, how steady. I ruined the best thing I ever had." There it was, the line I once dreamed of hearing. But instead of satisfaction, I felt only distance. I watched him closely. His eyes were red-tired. There was no spark of the man I once loved, only a shadow of his former pride. "You told me to pretend we weren't together that night," I said softly. "Remember?" He blinked, shame rippling across his face. "Evelyn, I didn't mean it like that." "But you did," I interrupted gently. "You said it. You wanted me invisible, so I learned how to be. I learned how to live without being seen, and somewhere in that silence I found myself." His throat tightened. "I know I hurt you. I was stupid. I thought I needed more excitement, ambition. But you were everything. You were home." I let out a slow breath. "Home isn't somewhere you abandon when you get bored, Ethan. You left because you mistook stability for dullness. You called love comfortable, like it was an insult. But comfort, real comfort, is what people spend their whole lives searching for." He took a step closer. "Can we start over? Please, I've changed. I'm trying to fix things." I looked at him, truly looked. His apology wasn't manipulation this time, it was brokenness. But forgiveness and reunion aren't the same thing. "No," I said quietly, "we can't. You told me to pretend we weren't together." I did, and I've kept pretending ever since. Now it's not pretending anymore, it's just the truth. He blinked hard, his composure slipping. "So that's it. After everything we were." I smiled sadly. We're strangers now, Ethan, just like you wanted. Behind me, the music shifted, a slow song, starting laughter spilling from the dance floor. Daniel caught my eye from across the garden. He lifted his hand slightly wordlessly, asking if I was okay. I nodded. Ethan followed my gaze. His jaw tightened. Is he better than me? I didn't answer immediately. Then I said softly, he doesn't have to be. He's just kind. That broke him. His shoulders sagged, and for a moment I almost felt sorry. Almost. He whispered, I lost everything, Evelyn. I looked at him one last time, calm and steady. No, Ethan, you threw everything away. And with that, I turned and walked back toward the music. Daniel reached out his hand when I returned his thumb, brushing lightly over my knuckles. All good, he asked. All good, I said, smiling genuinely this time. As we began to dance beneath the string lights, I caught a glimpse of Ethan standing alone near the bar, watching. His reflection shimmered faintly in a window behind him, small, distant, swallowed by the glow of everyone else's joy. That night, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt free. He became exactly what he told me to be, invisible, and me, I became everything he thought I wasn't, confident, alive, unashamed. In a way, it was poetic justice. He had tried to erase me from his story. Instead, I'd outgrown his pages entirely. Later, as Daniel and I walked to the car, the city lights danced on the windshield. He squeezed my hand and said quietly, You handled that beautifully. I smiled, looking out at the skyline. No revenge, no anger, just peace. He nodded. That's the best ending, isn't it? Yes, I whispered. The ending where I finally stopped pretending. And as the car pulled away, I realized that the whisper that once broke me had become my greatest gift because it taught me how to listen to my own voice again.